I was 38 before I voted for my first time. I had a very negative view of politicians. I would say they're all the same, what do they know? I watched decisions that had been made when I was in the military, decisions I'd seen in life, and I felt that there was a detachment from what was happening in Westminster to what was happening in the real world. I could ignore it, I could moan about it, or I could do something. I was 8, Dad had died. Going back into school, I had to go in later that day because the teacher was going to say that Stuart's dad has died. Don't discuss it. If there had been an education and more around this, I would have not suffered the level I did over many years later. But all of those experiences, those real life experiences that I had, helped me in my role as a politician. I love my country and I want my children to grow up in a country they can be proud of.
Welcome to the podcast, Death, a Changing Industry. Today with the great pleasure to welcome the South Shropshire MP, Stuart Anderson.
Thank you, John. Delighted to be here.
Thank you for joining us and really interested to learn about your backgrounds and your life of service. I think that's really fair to say. Everything that you've done, from what I've understood and researched on you, is based on service. So going back then, prior to becoming MP for South Shropshire, could you talk about your experience in the military, please?
Yes. So my father had been in the SAS. He sadly died when I was young, but I think the impact, and my mother served in the forces, my grandparents. So I came from a long line of military people. So it was something you grew up understanding. And when I left school, I pretty much went straight into the military, joined the Royal Green Jackets, now the Rifles, and embarked on my career. As I was past training, I passed out best recruit. I was delighted, went to battalion, and 2 days before my 18th birthday, I was shot, a live firing attack in the Brecon Beacons, and my friend had what we'd best describe as a cook-off. The weapon got too hot and fired off and shattered my foot. It took me almost a year to learn to walk, run, and get back to full active service, where I went straight onto the streets of Northern Ireland for my first operational tour. Went on to do Bosnia, Kosovo, things like that, and then left the military, but continued to work in security and defence around the world, all the lovely places like Iraq and more complex operations. It was something that I was immersed in. I knew it and I loved it, and I saw it as a way of service. It wasn't a job for me, it was a vocation and a way of life.
Yeah. So back to service then. So you did that time in security and intelligence, would it be as well?
Defence.
And then you've moved into politics as well. So how did that progression happen?
So I'm 48 now. I was 38 before I voted for my first time. I had a very negative view of politics, Westminster, a naive view, if I must say, because I would say they're all the same, what do they know? And I watched over the years, I watched decisions that had been made when I was in the military, decisions I'd seen in life, and I felt that there was a detachment from what was happening in Westminster to what was happening in the real world. So when I saw the Brexit vote happened, I thought the country was going to be divided. And I've seen that in other countries, like when I saw in Bosnia, how divisions grow. I love my country, and I want my children to grow up in a country they can be proud of. So I could do one of three things. I could ignore it, I could moan about it, or I could do something. Sometimes I think I should have just ignored it. I decided to do something and literally just stepped into politics, but kept thinking probably what's the inferiority complex going. Look at all these politicians from polished backgrounds who've done all these type of things, and actually I wasn't from that world. I wasn't from the political world. I kept thinking I'm going to get told your journey ends here. And I ended up being a councillor in Herefordshire first, in a seat that wasn't supposed to be one. I then got elected in 2019 as an MP, and then turned up in Parliament, where I think I'd visited twice in the past.
Wow.
I didn't even know my way around, and people were speaking a language I didn't fully grasp because I wasn't overly from that world. However, I found out about 18 months, 2 years to getting into it, that all of those experiences, those real life experiences that I had, helped me in my role as a politician. And I've been there since.
Yeah, and as you were talking before you said it, I was thinking actually it's the experience that you've gone through in your life. You haven't led a political life where you've grown up to take on that role, and I think that's probably why you're doing so well, because people do feel connected to you. From being from Bridgnorth, South Shropshire, I see the work that you're doing in the community. You're like truly helping people, groups, businesses, individuals. And our previous MP, Philip Dunn, was fantastic. But you do seem like very integrated, like very much out there doing lots of community work. And that's, again, Philip was very, very supportive of my work I've been doing with the campaign. But I think you're very much, people feel like a lot more aligned to you. Is that a fair comment?
Well, that's very kind of you, thank you. I think if I go back to why I stepped into this, it was to see about that my kids can grow up in a country they can be proud of. And I think for actually several decades, we've been losing sight of who we are as a country and those great British values that we have. And actually, you could ask many people, what are British values? And it's not easy to define that at the moment. I've lived a real life. I've seen highs and lows. I've got an amazing wife who's been with me through the whole journey. I've got 5 children. And when my kids have a problem at school, it's real. Yeah. When something happens in the community, I live here, this is my community, so I feel it. And if I say to someone I'm going to go and do something, I will try everything in my power. Well, I will go and do it, but I can't always determine what the outcome is. But I'm very driven and resilient to push through to see that I can get that outcome for people. One of the biggest things, or the biggest area that would be huge disappointment to me, is if I say to somebody, I'm going to go and do something, and just saying it for the sake of things. That's not me as a person. So I'm learning every day, but I love the community. So when I'm not working, I'm in the community, taking my kids to fetes, taking them to swimming club, all these different things. So people's problems locally are also my problems. People's joy that they have would be my joy. And it's great to see, even last night, the beacons lit around South Shropshire. I reckon, I heard there was 80 across the country. There's a huge chunk of them in South Shropshire. Yeah. They're proud to be British and of our heritage here, and I love that.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. Regarding about you saying something and backing it up, so I personally seen that as well, and I'm very grateful for the support you have shown me and the campaign to add content on death, dying and bereavement into our education system. And you mentioned the death of your father when you were a young person, and you spoke about that in Parliament. What did that mean to you, speaking at the debate on December the 2nd, 2024?
Well, first of all, if I talk about, like say, I've helped you within what you're doing, you are pioneering and driving through not just a personal experience, that you want to change people's lives. That, for me, is brilliant, because you're not coming to me saying, this doesn't work. There's many people say, something doesn't work. I often say, what do you want to do about it? What would you want me to do about it? And regularly people go, I don't know, I'm just telling you it doesn't work. And I'll sometimes work with them to try and find a solution. I love it when people say, there's this issue, this is what I'm trying to do to solve it, can you get behind this? That's brilliant, and I want to champion people like yourself of what you're doing. So actually the debate that we had in December, it was quite shocking for me, and we haven't spoke about this side of it, because I saw that your campaign had been running for a long time. You had Philip Dunn, the previous MP, had got behind you. It was great to see. And the local councillor, Kirsty Hurst-Knight, had done a great job. She's just stepped down. That'll be a huge loss for the area. But she had been front and centre with you, breaking down those doors that were closed. And when you see that, and energy, a drive and enthusiasm, regardless of the topic, you want to get behind that person to support. And as one of my constituents who got in touch, initial meeting, really good to talk about it. I thought, oh, this is interesting. It wasn't till I was preparing for the debate that it started hitting home, because I wasn't going to speak about something that was good for the constituency, which this topic is. It was something I'd personally lived. Yeah. So although it's good for the constituency, I'd been through this. And actually, when you're speaking of death, dying and bereavement, you need to really think of how you get this right and get that message across. So there's huge pressure on me. Thanks, John. But actually, as I was going through preparing for that speech, I looked back and thought, wow, actually, if there had been an education and more around this, I would have not suffered the level I did over many years later. So it became very personal and wasn't just a debate. It was something that I want to work with you to see that we get this over the line and actually get death, dying and bereavement in education, get awareness around it. Let's not make it people afraid to talk about this subject, because it will happen to everybody at some stage. Yeah. So yeah, it became very real for me.
Yeah, and I could feel that on the night. Obviously I couldn't speak, which was hard for me. But to hear you talk, like, you represented the campaign, and like you say, what you delivered from a sort of societal view was so correct. But then to hear out your own personal experience, it was very moving. It was very, very moving. And I don't know, to hear the campaign in Parliament, it was quite surreal. But also it was very powerful to hear, obviously, yourself and other MPs as well, who I didn't know, talk about their grief. Like, is that normal for Parliament to have those sort of lived experiences discussed at that level?
It's unusual. So yeah. I shared my maiden speech when I first got elected to Parliament. And people said you could hear a pin drop in the chamber, because I spoke about my dad dying at a young age, my mum bringing me and my two younger brothers up, going without food to feed us, so the knock-on sort of impact. And then I spoke about getting shot, reaching rock bottom, post-traumatic stress, going to take my life and moving on. And I actually, before that maiden speech, all I wanted to do was stand up and say, I'm going to be a good MP, here's 3 good things in the constituency. But I'd been given a platform where I could make change. And I didn't even tell my wife what I was going to say. Nobody knew. Yeah. And I went to one MP who I bounced it off, said, want to sense check this. And he was coming to say, you don't need to share it. When he heard it, he says, you need to share it. Yeah. But then people are going, that's very brave. And people came and spoke to me. Other MPs would come and speak to me and say, I've had a similar experience. Yeah. And what you can find is, like in the Westminster Hall debate, there was a mix of political parties, MPs coming together over grief, over personal experience, and normally that's where the best legislation is shaped. When real life experience, cross-party, comes together and people can take that forward. Yeah. Because it's not about, this looks like something I want to support, or it's a real experience that will change lives, and that's what you're doing. No,
well, thank you again, Stuart, for your support and ongoing support. There's more to do yet. You mentioned the loss of your dad when you were younger. Could you go back, and you touched on it in Parliament on December the 2nd, about the level of communication that you experienced around the time that he died, about the environments that you were in, what communication was used to you?
I remember it being the oldest of 3 boys. All family members were down visiting, and it was the days, I grew up in Hereford, it was the days where most of the people in the street looked after each other. Yep. They all were there. It was community. I grew up new in community. Yep. So I was round 2 doors down at my friend's Paul's. We were playing there. Nan and Grandad had been down, and then I remember getting a call that got to go back. No, I'm playing. It's okay. Everybody had moved out of the house, and I'd had my dad was from a big Scottish family, so we always had different people moving in and around and visiting. But I went round, and it was just Mum. I remember taking me upstairs with the boys and explaining Dad had died. And I was 8, trying to get your head around that, and it was in the summer holidays, so I think it was the beginning of August. We were in the summer holidays, and then we had all the arrangements for the funeral, so everybody was visiting. We didn't actually go to the funeral. He's buried at the SAS graveyard in St Martin's. We didn't go. Mum made the decision at the time that me and my brothers would go to our friend's farm, and we spent the day there. It's obviously very emotional. It's hard for her.
Yeah.
And I love my mum dearly, and we spoke about the many different things. She said, I probably would have asked you to go knowing what I do now. She made no mistake. She did what she felt best for her children, and I stand by her on that. But then it was all the thank you cards, and we spent ages reading, through tears, boxing Dad's stuff up, who got his little badge of this, all those type of things. And then going back into school, what was a month after my dad had died, I had to go in later that day because they were going, the teacher was going to say that Stuart's dad has died. Don't discuss it. And that's pretty much what my friend told me had happened. Lad Paul, whose house I was around at the time, my neighbour. But nobody spoke about it. And I think, so I was 8, right the way through to the end of primary school. I don't believe anybody had discussed it. It was raised a few years later at a parents' evening when I was classed as slightly misbehaving. Actually, sometimes a bit naughty, as you do in life as a young kid who's gone through things like that. Yeah. And they said that the teachers said we didn't know how to address it to my mum because of the loss of his dad. Yeah. So it was just an environment. Don't talk about it.
Yeah. It's such a missed opportunity because with some basic communication, I think actually just acknowledging is so powerful. To make an 8-year-old boy aware that we do know and we are here for you. If you need to talk, Stuart, we're all here. Your voice matters. I wonder about the outcome and how you would have felt if that communication had been used to you in school.
It would have been a different outlook. And I did speak with Mum. My mum, we regularly talk about it. And as I said, so I was 8. I think my brother James was 5 and Drew was, I think he was 3 at the time. So there was the whole dynamics of that. And I remember, I think for about a year or 2 after, Christmas was amazing, birthday. So we got presents from all these distant relatives we'd never heard of or didn't know, but they were all sending us presents. And it was, because of what had happened, we were invited out to all these different places. It felt, okay, this is good. But it wasn't discussed. If at school, that was there where I was sad in the school, I could have spoke to a teacher or had some pastoral support in the school, that would be better than just fighting. Because many times I'd get so angry, I'd end up fighting with the other kids, getting told off and then getting in trouble. And actually, trying to deal with that, it was like I had this thing that was almost a secret, but everybody knew, and I couldn't speak about it to anyone other than my mum, and that was really hard. And it built up. So what I did is I suppressed that, and I dealt with that many years later. And I think people do suppress things, they hold them back, and they find either through breaking down all the right people around them, they can address with them. If it was dealt with at source, and it doesn't take the pain away, but it brings the trauma out, and a traumatic event is basically unprocessed in the brain. You can't always choose when that comes up. And I'd learned very well through that experience, which built on, I learned how to suppress pain, how to put thoughts down. And throughout my life, through all those challenges, I built and built and built on that of what I learned from a young age. And I think many things I went through in life, many of that trauma could have been changed if I'd learnt from a young age to talk about it.
And do you think you kind of reached a breaking point then with that suppression?
I did. So I openly said about this. I think after then getting shot. So Dad died at 8. I was 17 when I got shot.
17 is young, isn't it? I joined the Navy when I was 18.
Yeah.
I was a young 18-year-old. That 17 is very young.
Yeah, I looked about 12.
Yeah.
I was a young kid because although I talked through what I'd been through, I brought up in a real loving house. My mum was so caring for us, and what she did, putting us 3 boys first in everything, was brilliant. But it meant I went into the army, and some of the lads from the bigger cities, they grew up in rough environments, and I was like, oh God, this is quite strange for me. So I was very young for that time. 2 days before my 18th birthday, you get shot, and I was told you're never going to walk without the aid of a walking stick, you're never going to run, and your career's over, and we're going to amputate your foot if you don't come through the surgery. So you're like, oh, what's happening? So I made a decision halfway through that first month in hospital that I was going to return to full active service no matter what pain it took. So I chose to suppress everything.
Wow.
I did physio, which was brutal. It was hard, manipulating bones, trying to get them in place to work, to learn to walk again. And it was everything to not have that foot amputated. I have had an operation this year where ultimately it's caught up, and I've had some of the toes taken off and my foot rebuilt. So 31 years later, I'm facing those problems that I had from there. But it was about between 12 and 14 years after getting shot, I literally broke down and couldn't face life anymore. And it was about suppressing it, having nightmares at night, suppressing it, using alcohol. I had issues around violence because that was the anger that would come out. The alcohol would allow me to escape from the pain.
Yeah.
And in the end, it's all things from your dad dying, from getting shot, to losing friends. All those type of things over time just ended up building up, and finally, for me, I broke.
Yeah. Well, it's and just going back to that resilience, persistence, determination that when you were told about your foot might have to be amputated, it's like you have a choice almost. And I do believe a lot of people are kind of just like, okay, whatever you think. But there's almost like a stubbornness, determination. No, I'm not stopping. And even though, like you say, years later this year, you've had surgery done on your foot, and you say it's caught up with you, but I disagree. I think it's just like you've done it. You've gone through all that time and you pushed on. A lot of people, I think, would have gone for the other option at the point of being told your foot needs to be amputated, but you've chosen the other, which I think is commendable, and it requires a lot of bravery.
I sometimes class bravery and stupidity as a fine line crossing over. So the more I got told I couldn't do it, the more I was determined to do it. And I've seen many years later where I've had support for this, and looking back at previous trauma, I got used to fighting. So I would fight. I believed I was going to do this, so I would fight no matter what. It was just... It came at a cost, though. Yeah. So I removed any emotion, any ability to interact with my family. I was emotionless. I'm a very different person now. I've come through all of that. I wasn't able to show love to my kids and that, because when you suppress things, it's not just the bad things that suppress. Yeah. It's the good parts of you. And it felt like a bit of me was dying each day. And then you become numb to everything. And you think bad things are going to happen. So I just expect that, and things in life that you didn't think were impacting you, but it was just going down and down. And someone said to me, would you do the same again? I thought, the way I'm made, I probably would do.
Yeah. I'm sure you would.
But I would I would speak about it more. I would put people around me from an early stage that could walk it with me. And it was having good people around me later on in my life that I was able to deal with the things from many years before.
Was that through therapy, like professional therapy, or just you understanding, having conversations with like your wife, your family, that would help you as well? Or was it a combination of both? Like what has helped you move forward?
It is ultimately what I would have said my long-suffering wife at the time. So having PTSD, waking up at night, having nightmares, using alcohol to suppress the pain. And we got married, we've been married 26 years this year. So my wife has walked through all of that with me. and we've had the highs and lows. Actually, our marriage broke down. We split up for a year. We were going to get divorced because I was just unable to be around people.
Present.
Yeah. And I was there, but I wasn't there.
Yeah.
But then for me, it was that final point where I couldn't take life anymore. And I couldn't take my life. And I felt a complete failure. I thought, I can't even get this right. But I took my kids to church. I thought I would not want my enemies. I don't have enemies now, but I wouldn't want anybody to live my life, let alone my children. So I thought, if I can take them to church, maybe they can have a different life to me. My life's finished. And that was where I went to church, and to me, I found faith. I thought that God was real and there was a purpose for my life. That gave me the ability to see through the next hour. It gave me hope.
Yeah.
And I think Desmond Tutu, I said again on my maiden speech, describes hope as the ability to see light in the darkness. Yeah. I had not seen light for many years. Then that hour gave me another 2 hours. It gave me a day, it gave me a week, a month. I have had therapy. I've had professional counselling, and I've had good people around me that have walked through it. And what I would say, those people would have walked through it before with me, but I didn't allow them.
Yeah.
So it was going, hands up, I failed. And people would say, no, you're not failed, but you've just identified that there was a problem. And it was that ability to put my hands up. And I remember that time I went to church, I cried for probably what was the first time for 15 years.
Yeah.
I didn't cry, I was emotionless, and I was crying like a little kid, sobbing my eyes out. And I thought, this is a sign of weakness. It's not.
Yeah.
It's a sign of being able to address those things.
Wow.
But yeah, it's been a roller coaster.
Hey guys, thank you for watching the video so far. I hope you're really enjoying it. Please click the thumbs up on the video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, a huge thank you to our sponsors. Their details are found in the video description just below. Thank you so much.
So, MP of South Shropshire, and what we've talked about with bereavement and challenges, which you have had your fair share of those. Do you see with young people in South Shropshire like a rise at all in challenges for young people? And do you see any experiences around bereavement and grief with young people in South Shropshire with your MP hat on?
Yeah, so an MP goes to events, so you think it's about kissing babies and cutting ribbons. You get invited all over the place. You go to different things, and you do surgeries. So people are emailing, I want to see my MP. I've got a great team that actually process, and people think it's to filter out, it's to filter in. So if somebody says, I want to discuss with Stuart something that's happening in another country and it's important to them, that is important to them. But I can set out my position of what that looks like. And what I'm trying to find is those people that need to see me because they have just lost a loved one. They and we're running a campaign where I'm supporting a constituent about closed mortuaries. She couldn't see her son for 10 days that had died.
Yeah.
I get to see, as on my surgeries, we sometimes have run them weekly if the demand's there, or every fortnight. I get to see what I call the leveller. When you sit down with someone and they're in tears because they have reached the lowest point of their life, you see this and you find ways to help and support. I do see grief regularly. There's surgeries where I'm fighting back and holding the tears back because it is just so emotionally painful what people have gone through. And those are the people that I'm trying to see regularly, face to face. I want to see everyone, but if you just take, in the first 8 months I had about 6,000 bits of casework. That would take me many years to see all of those people, whereas I'm trying to make sure, you're in Parliament Monday to Thursday, you come back for your constituency Friday and some Saturdays, trying to see the people I can. And if you can see 3 people in that hour, there's a limit to how many you can do. So I'm trying to get to the most complex cases, the hardest, what people are dealing with, because a lot of my work can be dealt with before people have come to see me, but some of these, they need to sit down and I need to hear their pain, find a way with them to come through this.
Yeah.
And sometimes you look at it and think, this could have been dealt with 20 years ago if that person had had the support they needed at that time.
Yeah.
And you look at what they've been through that time. And I imagine if I was sat in front of myself 15 years ago as this lad going, I've been through this, you'd go, if only you'd had this at an earlier age, that would have helped. It wouldn't have taken the trauma, but you've been able to process it, deal with it, and work through it. And I think it would have been brilliant to have those type of things. And I do see this. Obviously, I can't go into the details of a lot of the things that come across my desk. I regularly, I always have a caseworker or my office manager, Lorna, in there, and we often leave in silence because you're like, okay, that's hard.
Yeah.
That is painful to take in. But also, I think for myself, like you take on all this trauma.
Yeah.
You take other people's, as you will do in your line of work, and I make sure I've got good people around me to support me, because if you're hearing trauma all the time, it has a knock-on effect. So I work things in my life to, how do I stay compassionate, how do I say empathetic on certain areas, but how do I stay resilient to work with people? And I think one of the things I found when I became a politician is how you keep your heart soft, but you keep your resilience, because if you lose your resilience, you'll crumble in this job.
Yeah.
If you don't have a soft heart, it's time to step out of this job.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. That's fascinating. And then, so obviously the work that you're doing in South Shropshire is very apparent. The support you're giving individuals, you've mentioned. As a nation, as Parliament, what can we do at a sort of higher level across the whole board to provide more consistent support? What do you think to that?
So I think to remove the not stigma is the wrong word, the taboo. Someone's if you say somebody's lost someone, okay, we'll give them space, or actually people don't know how to deal with it. And I've lost quite a few friends through the military, and I couldn't deal in the early days with the funerals, so I didn't go to them. And that was a knock-on I found later in life, because I didn't go to my dad's funeral. I think I was mid-20s before I went to my, even late 20s before I went to the first funeral.
So is that your relationship with a funeral?
Yes. Yeah. So, and actually it was easier to not go, not discuss it, not see the family. I remember watching my friend's coffin go on a plane in Kosovo, seeing those type of things. And for me, that was the end of that journey. There's a whole family that have to live everything, but I still was reenacting mine from many years ago. So all of those things were quite hard. So I think it's removing the taboos, educating children from a young age, and understanding, as they say, death and taxes. And the government are certainly doing loads on taxes, but I think we need to do loads more on death. It's something that if you educate children from a young age, they will understand and they will grow up removing those taboos around that. I think there is a lot more that can be done.
Yeah.
And as society as a whole, it's down to people in the communities how they deal with it. But if the government can put death, dying and bereavement into education, well, they can do it. It's a very simple thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much, and they can put this in. And we've spoken many times about the importance of this, but you're educating children from a young age. And so I've got 5 children. In between child 3 and 4, we had a miscarriage. We then had, then my 4th child was born. We then had an ectopic pregnancy, another miscarriage, and we went through all of that. We're so determined with the 5th one. People say, why do you need 5 kids? Because we'd had that loss, we were determined to do that. And we've got Willow, our youngest, who's just turned 6 last week. She was a twin didn't survive. Yeah. But my kids grew up, we didn't, they knew about it. We didn't hide it. You know, that was your sister. That's the things that we talk through. so they got an understanding of that. When we've lost relatives or things like that, we'll talk through it with the family, with the children, because they need to understand from that young age. But I think the government can do this to put it into education.
Yeah. And to hear about, again, your family, the events that you've been through, the loss that you've suffered, these losses are part of your life, and actually they're part of your children's lives. And by just ignoring it, as I say, you've experienced it firsthand, that can create suppression and all other sorts of problems as well. So I think it's evidence. Having the conversation doesn't cause problems. Not having the conversation can cause problems. Moving forward then, so the debate took place on the 2nd of December 24, and it's still at now a cross-party group. Where are we at now with the updates? Do you know any further updates for us at all, for those watching?
So you secured over 10,000 signatures. It's normally 100,000 for a debate in Westminster Hall. And Westminster Hall is the place where you can get into the details of many topics that are important, like the one you've raised, that are not necessarily coming up on the government agenda in the main chamber. So at the moment there is cross-party support for this. The minister was there, who we both spoke to at the end, who was very sympathetic to this. But what you would have seen, so I was a deputy chief whip before, when you look at things, that you're looking at problem legislation. If I bring this forward, who have I got to manage? Will I pass the vote? Will it be well received? Is it politically toxic? And all of those things would have helped been removed with the Westminster Hall debate, because you had cross-party support, honouring each other, different MPs, not fighting as you see on PMQs. It was, this is good, let's bring it together. And more often than not, people say, why is there not many people in Westminster Hall? There is that many things on in Parliament. You can only be in one place at a time. But that was well attended, good support there. This really now, the pressure needs to be on the government, because they can see cross-party support, but the government have the ability to bring this into power. And the numbers in Parliament are skewed to how they normally are. Normally you get smaller majorities that allows opposition parties to put stronger pressure on. This isn't so much about opposition of political parties putting pressure on. This is about doing the right thing for people. And I believe the government understand this. I'll keep pushing it forward, as well as you are and many others, to keep moving this forward. And hopefully, when they look at what legislation do we need to bring around about this, they can bring this in and it can be put in. I think it's one of those that you're not going to be finding a pushback. It's not one of those politically toxic ones where, here we go, this is going to hurt. This is one that actually it's good for our communities and society and the country as a whole.
Stuart, thank you so much. And again, thank you for your support on the campaign, and also what you're doing for South Shropshire as an MP. It's very clear as a resident of the area that you're very much behind the area. Well, it's your area, you live here, like you say. My last question to you is, your father, who died when you were young, if he could see all the work that you're doing now, how you're very much about service before self in everything that you've done, what do you think he'd say to you?
No. That's an interesting question. Probably the hardest one to answer. I'd love to think he was proud of the work I was doing. Yeah, I think because he served his country, served his country with pride. Yeah, I think he'd be proud of what I'm doing. And sometimes you look back and you wish you could just have that conversation with him and say, yeah, I've done this, or what about that? And I look back at one moment when I was quite emotional about it. It was my pass-off parade, and I was going to be the best recruit, say 17 at the time. And I remember the night before, really upset with my mum, and well, it was the week before I was going through. I said, my dad won't see this. And she said, yeah, but you've taken that forward, and you can do that with pride. Well done. Yeah. So it was sad they hasn't seen it, but I think he'd be proud of what I try and do.
That's it. And I think what you've done, but actually what you're continuing to do now as well. You mentioned about some of the trips you've got planned. It's incredible work that you're doing, and just a huge thank you again. And thank you for sharing your story on here and also in the debate in December as well. It really means a lot. And I think South Shropshire are really lucky to have you. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for all you're doing to find people in the community that have something, or are taking it forward, getting huge momentum, but just need that bit of help. How do we make this change legislation? But to me, you're the real hero in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Thanks so much indeed.